Hey everybody, thank you for joining me for the third episode of the Green Life podcast. Today I have an extraordinary guest. Her name is VictoriaMoran. Victoria is the author of 13 books, one of which is Creating a Charmed Life, and is the book I got to know her through when I was studying at IIN a few years ago. Victoria has been a vegan for 38 years, and she is the founder and director of Main Street Vegan Academy, which certifies vegan lifestyle coaches and educators. She has also a book called Main Street Vegan and a radio show podcast on Unity Online Radio. She's also producer of the new documentary called A Prayer for Compassion. She was also nominated by Peta as the Sexiest Vegan over 50, in good company with Dr. Kahn, who will be a guest here in a few weeks. Victoria has been an inspiration for me. She's an inspiring woman, an amazing storyteller, and I cannot wait for you to listen to her. Welcome, Victoria. Hi, Victoria. Thank you so much for joining me for the podcast today. How are you?
Oh, thank you, Chantal. Lovely to see your smiling face from far away, but it's almost like you're here.
I know. We managed to always keep in touch using technology, so it's a good thing that this exists.
It is.
Yeah. So I did an introduction about you, explaining to people what a wonderful powerhouse you are. Oh. You're an author, you have an academy, you also have a beautiful, which I love, rescue dog at home called Corpse and Thunder, the pigeon.
Yes.
Company. And I just love that you are so passionate about this lifestyle. And before we delve into how to create a charmed and kind life, which you created, definitely, I'd like people to get a little bit of a background about you and your story, because I think, especially as my audience is mostly navigating towards women, your story with your food addictions and your struggle can feel really relatable. For me, it was, and it is, because it took me years to get better from eating disorders and having this terrible relationship with food. But I know a lot of people feel that way. So take me through your journey, because I always love listening to you.
Oh, sure. And, we learn so much from other people's stories. A lot of people have been fascinated lately by the Netflix series about this young woman who actually became a criminal, inventing Anna, because she was trying to be okay. She was trying to be what society and all the magazines that she read as a teenager told her was okay, even if it meant breaking laws and deceiving people to do it. And it was so interesting for me watching that, because I related to the young girl reading those magazines and getting my ideas about what it meant to be acceptable. And certainly one of those things back in the day when I was a teenager, which was the 1960s, was you're supposed to be thin. And I don't think that message is nearly as strong now as it was then. I think it's still there in an underlying way. But at that time, there was just one way to be. It was very skinny and ideally really tall too. But since you couldn't do anything about your bones, if you could be skinny, that kind of made up for the height. And so I was never skinny. I really liked food as a little kid. My dad was a diet doctor. And at one point, he and my mom started this thing called a reducing salon that they had back in the 50s. They were kind of a precursor to health clubs. And women would go there and put on these belts or get on these rollers, and they would be jostled with the idea that great chunks of themselves would float off into the stratosphere. Never happened for me. I was on diets from the time I was a little kid. And then when I got to be old enough to make some of my own decisions, I put myself on diets because that's what the magazine said to do. So while all that was going on the outer level, I always had a very intact inner life. So from the time that I was a really small child, I had my first spiritual experience in my stroller. So I hadn't quite turned 3, and my nanny took me out late at night, and there were all these stars. And I remember just looking up at the stars and saying, that's home. You're here. You're doing this thing now. There's nothing wrong with it, but it is not home. And that was such a clear experience, such a clear memory. And so always I was fascinated by spiritual ideas and all the traditions of the world. I was supposed to be Catholic, and that was all beautiful with the incense and the stained glass. But my ideas, I remember once explaining reincarnation to a nun in catechism class. That did not go over well.
Oh my God, she must have had a stroke.
So it was this interesting kind of dual young life of trying to look and appear acceptable on the outside when I wasn't, because I wasn't thin and I had bad hair and I had bad skin and I just couldn't quite get it together. But then inside there was this magic, and then magical things started happening in my life on the outside too, despite my looks hadn't really changed. But when I was 14 and the Beatles came to America, I got a press card from a teen magazine and rather miraculously got into the Beatles press conference in my hometown in Kansas City. And I remember being there and in the hotel where the press conference was to be held and looking out at all these girls my age across the street in a park behind ropes. And something just told me, you're not cool, and the cheerleaders won't talk to you, and you've got this weight problem and all these other things that make you not right, but you're inside and they're outside. So something is right. And I guess that's when I started to learn that we all have what we need to get where we're supposed to be. And if it's not what society says we need, we've still got what we personally need. So I met a whole lot of rock groups of the era, went to another Beatles press conference, befriended one of their managers. Paul McCartney bought me a drink when I was 17. So I started having these experiences that are telling me, you know what, despite everything, despite all the turmoil, you live a charmed life. So I've been navigating life now for, I'll be 72 next month. And I still see it like that. So with the food, I did all kinds of diets and stuff like that, and that they were just hopeless. What I needed was a little bit of magic, and I got it in two ways. So one side of it was that I completely surrendered to a 12-step program of Overeaters Anonymous, which is a spiritual program of recovery that involved turning everything over to a higher power of my understanding. And I love that idea. It's like, how dare anybody tell me how I see the big picture? That's very personal. We all get to do that. So I did that. And in the process of doing that, it was very clear to me that I could be vegan. And I tried to be vegan for years. At that point, I'd gone vegetarian about 12 years earlier. And it was just so clear that even though the world was saying, oh my goodness, if you eat all those carbs, you're going to be fat. Well, what happened was the weight that I had to lose at that time, the 60 pounds, fell away, has not returned. And this was 38 years ago. And I've just done my best, very not perfectly by a long shot, but I show up pretty much every day trying to be in alignment with what some people would call God's will, what yoga and Eastern teachings would call Dharma, my path, my duty, what's here for me in the day ahead. And, it works pretty well. It doesn't mean life is always easy, but I sure would not want to be navigating life without the experiences I've had and knowing what I do.
Yeah, absolutely. And you called that your free square, right, in your book?
Well, that's from my book, Creating a Charmed Life. And, it's so funny how inspiration happens, because most things, and, I've written self-help books, basically, that's the category I'm in. So I have 13 books. And so much of that stuff is a particular author's rehashing of a good idea that certainly everybody has a take on gratitude or on living for the moment or on coming from a place of self-acceptance. There are all these kind of general ideas, and all of us who write these kind of books write about those. But every now and then, one of us will come up with an idea that really is unique. And I was blessed with that one of playing your free square. So if you've ever played the game of bingo, there is a free square in the middle of the bingo card. And it takes no luck, no strategy, because everybody gets one. Everybody's got a free square. And my contention is that we all have one for living life. So in the game of bingo, that free square counts just as much as any other square, B17 or O59 or whatever you might need to get closer to winning the game. The free square counts. And in life, it's something almost intangible that is so much a part of us, we sometimes don't even know we have it. It's a kind of gift. And it might be a talent, and it might be just a kind of savvy, like maybe you can talk to people, or maybe you can pick up certain things like languages or something very easily. And we use this free square to get us to the places that are harder. So the free square, it's kind of like just getting a boost, getting a little lift. So my particular free square is meeting people. So I talked about the rock groups in my young life, but it didn't stop then. I mean, I meet and befriend and know for decades people who are kind, helpful, compatible. Sometimes they're well-known people out in the world that, me as a girl from Kansas City really shouldn't be meeting at all, but I do. And sometimes, it's like with romance and things like that, it's such a blessing when somebody really finds the person that they feel is their soulmate, their own true love. But I feel like we can make all these connections with all kinds of people. And even though it's not that kind of connection where the person becomes, part of your family, but they kind of do become part of your extended family. So that's my free square. My free square is people, and other people have other ones. And I just think it's so important that you find out what yours is. And if you're like, I don't know, just ask somebody close to you, ask your sister, ask your best friend, because they see it all the time and they'll probably be surprised that you don't.
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, you definitely inspired me to leave banking and use my free square to actually become a coach and become a yoga teacher. So that was amazing because I felt like I was in a job that I didn't love. And just because you happen to know how to do certain things, it didn't really inspire me. And I thought there must be more. And after your talk at IIN, I just felt it was. But I also, as I said, related to the struggle with the food. And when I listened to you the first time, when I got to know you, I wasn't vegan yet. And I was, looking at the past, very proud about the fact that I studied nutrition. And it was, well, I learned about protein, and you can't get enough from vegetables, which is such old school and actually not true. And that same year when Dr. Neil Barnard gave a presentation and I had some health issues, I gave it a try and my world transformed. And I think, you clear all of that. And we can go in actually another title of you, which is the good karma diet, which I felt like as soon as you take that bad karma away, then the picture is clearer. Things happen in a much kinder way. And I think this is why this episode is titled Creating a Charmed and Kind Life, because I feel like you have brought all these pieces together. And, that your experience as a woman, as a human, and then extending to the kindness we can have for other living beings is just such a powerful lesson, especially for the generation that is coming of age now, where they can start understanding. And I mean, I know a lot of parents that are vegan now and they're raising vegan children, which is amazing. It wasn't a thing when I was a kid, right? So it's beautiful to see. And I think The titles that you have almost have taglines for the movements in our societies, if it makes sense. So it's great that you've done that. My next question about how this evolution happened, obviously you have a daughter. So I believe your daughter is vegan since birth, right?
Mhm.
Did you ever find her questioning the lifestyle choice?
No, she actually was very instrumental in making me vegan, because I looked at her one day in her crib, and I was lacto-ovo vegetarian at that time. And certainly during pregnancy, everybody was telling me, it's bad enough that you're vegetarian. You certainly have to eat eggs and dairy and all that. And so I just kind of looked down and saw her soul. And it's like, are you kidding? You really want to feed this child like dairy product made from the milk that is supposed to go to some other mother's child, that baby calf? And that was when I really knew I had to get serious about the 12-step program so that I could make choices, so that I could raise her vegan. So yeah, from the time she had solid food, she has been vegan, and she is now a stunt performer and aerialist and still vegan. And always, and we're talking now the 1980s and living in the Midwestern US. So just you kind of have to get it. It was very odd. And I would say, Rachel was her original name. She now goes by her middle name, Adair. If you ever want to eat, other foods, that's fine. If you might want to try them, your friends are doing it. And she would look at me like, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to harm an animal? Why would I want to eat something dead? And I was thinking that I was just being this wonderful liberal mother that wasn't pushing her into some sort of thing, but she got it immediately. And I think one way that she got it was that I explained to her about the animals early on, not gory, horrible things, of course, but just that animals are our friends. And we don't eat our friends. And so there weren't farm sanctuaries when she was a little tiny thing, but we would go to petting zoos. And I don't recommend that people go to petting zoos, because those are places where they take baby animals, and when they're not babies anymore, Lord knows where they go. Not recommending that. But at the time, it was all we had. And she got it immediately, that just like we had 4 cats at home that she loved, these goats and cows and chickens and pigs were the same. And we're all connected and we're all related. And there is this bond of love and respect and responsibility. And that seems like a very sophisticated, maybe religious or philosophical kind of concept. Little kids get it immediately because they just come from that. It's so funny. When she was little, we were Quakers for a while. I went to a friend's meeting outside Chicago where we were living. And I picked her up after, they call it first day school in the Friends tradition. And the teacher was telling me how they played and all. And I said, but I thought you were supposed to be teaching them about God. And this wise older woman said to me, well, we think at this age, they can teach us more about God. And it's so true. And they get the whole thing. Now, the hardest thing, or one of the hardest things when my daughter was little about being vegan, was to understand that really difficult concept of why there are people that we love and respect who are eating animals. My mother was visiting once, and during dinner, my daughter bursts into tears, and we finally get her calmed down. And she's just sobbing, and she's saying, I'm sad because grandma eats animals. And, this is tough, and then the teacher is wonderful and lovely and eats animals, and, so it's tough. And yet I think if you really prioritize raising children with security and truth and an understanding that life is complicated. And these are sophisticated concepts. but it seems like vegan kids can grasp a lot of them.
I think it's true. You said something really important there. Children can teach about God. And I think when we don't get the conditioning from society, our instincts are very much aligned with the Creator, right? And I mean, I can actually segue into you being a producer of a wonderful documentary called "A Prayer for Compassion," and I believe from what I saw from the preview, I will have to get it and read and watch it. There is there is a link to what the Most High is actually teaching us about diet. And I know Dr. Mills is part of the documentary, and I actually heard him talk about the vegan diet in Genesis. And I can tell you from my own research, as I am a big scripture researcher, there is a book called The Seal Portions, and even in there, the diet that Yeshua HaMashiach, the Hebrew name for Jesus Christ, it's actually a plant-based diet. So it's quite possible. Yeah, sorry.
Yes, well, it's very interesting historically that a very high percentage of early Christians, the ones we call the Desert Fathers, the early church fathers, were vegetarian. And we do see a little bit of this in the Bible when Paul is saying, would you guys just get off this talking about what you eat all the time? It's like, we got, bigger stuff going on here. But it was really true. And there's a beautiful woman in A Prayer for Compassion, which is about the tradition of kindness and harmlessness in all of the wisdom teachings of the world. But this woman is an evangelical Christian. Her name is Susie Welch. She was on the staff of the Today Show, and she's done a lot in the world, big business author. But she was saying that these early Christians were, and she used the word vegan, because of their love for Jesus Christ. And that love that came to earth with him stayed. It doesn't dissipate right away. And these people who were so close to his actual physical presence, even if we're talking 50 years later, 100 years later, that love was so powerful that they had to extend it to everyone. And we see this with other great spiritual teachers. We see this in the whole Jain tradition, which has been vehemently vegetarian from the very beginning. And now a lot of young Jains are becoming vegan. Certainly Hinduism has long suggested of vegetarianism because of that principle of ahimsa, of nonviolence. So in the film, which is a beautiful film made by Thomas Jackson, it came out in 2019, he traverses the US a couple of times. He goes to the climate conference in Morocco. He goes all over India, basically asking the question of, what does your tradition have to say about our relationship with other beings? Does what we choose to eat have anything to do with how we cultivate our soul? And I think anybody who watches the film would have to say, oh gosh, it really does.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we sometimes forget that a lot of our traditions are human made. And if we just go back and dig in what was principally shared by nature and the balance that we have with nature, we definitely should be living that kind of lifestyle. It just makes sense.
Right. And you mentioned Dr. Milton Mills, and he is a Seventh Day Adventist, which a lot of people know is the one Protestant denomination that recommends vegetarian or vegan eating to its members. And the reason for that is that the belief is that we are supposed to recreate this beautiful garden. We started out in a garden. And as Dr. Mills is fond of saying, Eden was vegan. The carnivorous animals weren't carnivorous until after the fall in the Genesis story. And so we've got this world doing all these activities that are just causing not only tremendous suffering to all beings, but actually destroying the planet itself. And this is going on in vast numbers. It's done by large institutions. It's done by governments. And so you almost look at that and say, what does it matter? I'm just one person. What can I do? But the idea is that if you create a little paradise, if your home is this beautiful, violence-free, hatred-free, cruelty-free zone, and somebody 2 blocks away has that same kind of home, and somebody across town has that, there are going to be enough of us eventually to lift things up. And there's that beautiful prophecy in the book of Isaiah about how things will one day be when there is this peace and this peaceful coexistence with all creatures. And I'm not saying that any of us in this lifetime is going to live to see that, but we can be there to build it. It's almost like those painters and the craftsperson that worked on those glorious cathedrals in Europe. Those things took 300-400 years to build. And yet everybody who worked on it was part of what ultimately came into being. And that's what we're doing. As vegans, we're not just saving animals right now, although that is extremely important. And we're not just even lightening the burden on the earth, and we're not just giving ourselves a healthy way to live, but we're creating this almost messianic, prophetic kind of future. We're putting the energy into the world to uplift everything.
Yeah, bring the vibrations up for sure. And so see how beautiful the connection is actually. You have your gifts, then you can actually implement lifestyles that enhance those gifts, and they don't only belong to you now. You are propagating those gifts to the world by being kind. So charmed and kind life, you see how they connect. And I believe you're a big yogi. You love yoga, and I think your lifestyle matches the kindness you have for yourself by practicing and taking care of your body, and as a result, having compassion for everybody around you, which is really great. But before we get into other things about this kindness, and how did yoga come about for you?
Very early on, actually. In fact, it was yoga that made me vegetarian. I had tried to be vegetarian when I was 13, younger, and I just didn't know what I was doing. And I got really hungry and went back. But when I was 17, I discovered yoga. And that sounds like such a strange phrase now because everybody knows about yoga. But at that time, everybody didn't. And there were 3 books in the Kansas City, Missouri Public Library about yoga. And I read all of them over and over. And they all said that if you were going to be serious about yoga, if you're going to be serious about your spiritual life, you really needed to be vegetarian. You needed to not eat animals. And I had heard about vegetarians before, and it was fascinating to me. And so that was the beginning of that. I found my first yoga teacher in London, where I moved when I was 18. She's still alive. She's 94, and she teaches 1 yoga class a week at a senior center, which is very cool. And so for me, the yoga is much more about the philosophy than it is about the asanas. The asanas are wonderful. I do practice those. I've never been fabulous. I've never been, double jointed or super strong or, any of that kind of Instagram yoga. But that's not necessary. It's basically the physical part of yoga is to get yourself in a position where you can meditate, where you can be still. Because what happens with the body, and I noticed this getting older, my friends are getting older, and we talk about these things, the body can become a distraction. And we don't want that. We want to be able to go out in the world and do good. We want to do our Dharma. We want to do the work we're supposed to do. We want to be able to sit in meditation and not be thinking, oh, my knee hurts, my hip hurts, my neck, because that's distracting. And so certainly at a certain point in life, as we're moving more toward leaving here than staying, some of these things are going to happen and we just have to deal with them. But what yoga and its sister science of Ayurveda are all about is to keep the the physical body cooperating with your spiritual growth, which is what we're all doing here to begin with, according to yoga. So my next book, my book that I'm working on now, is called Age Like a Yogi. And it's the idea that yoga philosophy isn't just something to talk about at dinner and sound like you know a lot of Sanskrit words. It's really a very practical way to infuse spirituality that works in this world too into your daily life. And it helps with human relationships. It helps with physical health. And it's just a beautiful way to do life. And it's not the only spiritual path. There are all kinds of spiritual paths and beautiful ways that people find meaning. I'm just real fond of yoga because it came into my life early. And the more I embrace it, the better my life works.
Yeah, well, amazing. I didn't even know you were writing that book. And it's so funny because yoga was definitely something that I wanted to connect to the conversation. Mostly because to me, it makes sense that when we find a kindness on the mat, it needs to translate in the actions in our life. But I don't see that. The more popular, I guess, and trendy yoga becomes, I think certain things get lost in the ways of the world, right? The traditions that we have as societies. So it's really nice to draw it back as you've done and remember, actually this has to be aligned. Like everything has to be aligned. You live, I love that. You live such an aligned life. So I actually have to ask you something. So everything is, vegan is a beautiful trend and it's huge now, but it does come with some shortcomings, right? The health part can be a little bit jeopardized, but the quality of food that, although have a vegan tag to them, are not necessarily healthy for our body. But I believe when you became vegan, that wasn't actually an issue. So probably you were like the healthiest vegan. You started on a plant-based diet, being vegan as well, right?
Yeah, there were a few junk foods at that time that had no animal products in them, making them technically vegan. We had potato chips and Planters peanut bars. I remember I went through a few of those. But basically, we had to eat whole plant foods because there weren't a lot of processed foods that didn't have any animal products in them. I used to joke that being vegan protected people from baked goods. But now, of course, people have figured out how to do all kinds of food vegan. And overall, I think that's good. I celebrate the fact that Beyond Burger and Impossible Burger together, even though I don't eat them, saved 1 million cows in 2021. That's a lot of ahimsa. That's a lot of life saving. And I have to understand that people are looking for different things in life and that it's not up to me to tell people how to live. That's their business. I do believe that it's up to me to share what I know about how the innocent are harmed by our choices. So I believe that the animals are counting on me to get veganism out into the world. In terms of what people want to do with that, with their own personal food choices, that's none of my business. There's all kinds of information out there about eating a super healthy, whole food, plant-based diet. There's information on raw food and on Ayurveda and on macrobiotics and on all kinds of super ways to be healthy to the body that are either already vegan or can be easily veganized. And that's great. But for people who want burgers and fries and cherry pies, then I'm so happy that that is now possible, veganized as well, because we're all together in saving the planet and trying to be part of this upward progression of the universe. And people's personal dietary choices are theirs. Now, I'm a health nut. I want to live really well as long as I'm here. And so I do my very best to make the choices that seem to me to be the smartest and the healthiest. And, that changes from day to day as I learn more. But I think it's very important, if you want to be healthy, that you eat foods that the body understands. And this is fruits, vegetables, grains, beans, nuts, and seeds. and then don't ruin them with how you cook them. You can take a perfectly beautiful vegetable and deep fry it, which ruins its chemical composition in terms of the physical aspects of your body. And in yoga, it's said that you take this beautiful vegetable that is what the yogis call sattvic. It's balanced, it's vibrating on this plane of beauty and perfection and being just what it's supposed to be. And then you deep fry it and it becomes what the yogis call tamasic, this energy of inertia and tiredness and lack of interest in others and in higher pursuits. So, eat your vegetables raw or steam them or a light saute and you'll be fine.
How do you feel about oil? Because I'm interviewing a lot of doctors that are actually concerned about the use of oils, and we know that coconut oil became quite popular a few years ago as a health choice, but in fact it's not. And even vegetable oils we should be wary about. How do you choose to?
I'm an observer in this debate. I absolutely do not use coconut oil because that is one of the few plant foods, coconut oil, palm oil, and to a lesser extent, cocoa butter, that are saturated fats. And the saturated fats mostly found in animal products are the ones that elevate cholesterol. And there's heart disease in my family going back, I don't know, to the Stone Age. It's what everybody had. It's what everybody died of. And so to me, to use coconut oil would just be suicidal. Now, I find the other oil debate really interesting. I know lots and lots of plant-based doctors who say, no, never. I'm not sure about that. The studies that have shown reversal of coronary heart disease were very low fat. So Dr. Ornish's original study didn't say no oil. It just said 10% of calories from fat. So if you were going to be using oil, it had to be little tiny quantities to keep the fat intake that low. And probably when Dr. Esselstyn did his study, he was saying no oil. So we know that kind of very low fat diet can indeed do what was once believed impossible, and that is reverse the plaque formation in the arteries. But there's also a lot of science that celebrates a Mediterranean diet. And nobody has ever done a study that looks at a Mediterranean vegan diet. Mm-hmm. So the kind of Mediterranean diet they're looking at has a lot of fish, has some meat, and the olive oil and the wine. What if we took the meat and the fish out of it? Nobody knows. Nobody knows how that would be. I know that in Ayurveda, which I feel very close to at this point in my life, they're okay with oil, especially for certain body types that just need a little bit of more grounding, stability, warmth, lubrication. So the truth is, I don't know. I don't know. I eat very little oil. I try not to heat it because I think that denatures it. I understand from the plant-based doctors that there's absolutely no nutritional need for it. We can certainly get ample fatty acids from plant foods and the fully formed omega-3 fatty acids that we need. Probably most people who are vegan will need to supplement that with an algae-based supplement. But otherwise, I just try to keep it simple. But I don't like the idea of making so many rules to this thing that people just don't want to look at it, that it just seems so complex. I think sometimes that it's almost like being introduced to religion by the Amish, that you're trying to follow all those rules, like, oh, it's so hard not to have electricity. It's so hard not to have an automobile, that you kind of forget, like, love God and love your neighbor. And so, to me, in the list of thou shalt nots as a whole food vegan, the meat and the fish are in a category of their own because they cause harm and they're destroying the planet and they're bad for our arteries and everything else in our body. And these other things may also be bad for our bodies. But I do think there needs to be a differentiation so that when people are just not able to do the whole straight and narrow, which nobody is all the time, even people who get into this for health reasons, they it's their birthday, it's their friend's birthday. They want a piece of cake. They want something. And so to me, we want those little splurges to be without animal products, without meat, fish, eggs, and dairy. And then if you're super disciplined and you never have a little splurge, you'll probably outlive all of us. But if you're just a regular person and you sometimes want a little something that is reminiscent of what you grew up on, it's like so many people are so surprised to learn that the creators of faux meats, we think it's some kind of new thing that just happened 2 years ago. The original vegetarian meats were created by Japanese Buddhist monks 2,000 years ago because they wanted to do the party line. They wanted to do what the Buddha taught, but they missed that stuff they grew up on. So they came up with faux meat. And I'm not going to say to somebody who feels that they need that, oh, no, that's just a terrible thing. It's like, no, that's a choice. Animal products, I think it could be very much argued, are a terrible thing.
Mm-hmm. I hear you. So you studied at Cornell, right? You did the T. Campbell.
Well, I took the T. Colin Campbell course. I would never say I studied at Cornell.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, it's through the eCornell platform. And I say that because I run into people who say that they are plant-based nutritionists or they're Cornell nutritionists. And it's like, no, that is 4 years of college and a 2-year master program. What we took was a wonderful online course, fascinating, intriguing. I found myself going, whoa, because they talk so much about the food industry and the governmental regulations. And there's just so much. Sometimes it's almost like a mystery novel. And it's a wonderful, wonderful course. But I didn't go to Cornell.
No, I meant the Cornell course. Yeah. I found a lot of people that did it they loved it. But yeah, you have to be careful. You can always, it's not an actual nutrition science course. But how has it impacted the way that you actually teach at your academy? Because your academy is beautiful and very helpful and helps people become coaches and educators. Did you feel that course supplemented a little bit the program that you have already?
I already had the program before I took the T. Colin Campbell course. They're very, very different. I can't even express the differences in intent. So Dr. Campbell's course, and Dr. Campbell is a hero. Oh my God, he's so magnificent, is about nutrition and food policy and human health. And nobody does it better. Main Street Vegan Academy is to train vegan lifestyle coaches and educators. It is to put out into the world experts on vegan living. So we do have usually 2 classes from plant-based medical doctors. Dr. Mills, that we've talked about, is on our faculty. Dr. Joel Kahn. We've had Dr. Michelle McMacken, Dr. Rob Ostfeld. Then we also have our dietitian, Marty Davey, whole food plant-based dietitian, who does a couple of classes. But we also have an animal rights lawyer. We have a fashion designer. We have someone from an environmental action tank. We have experts in vegan business. We have coach trainers. We have people that help working with mixed and transitional families. So people go out into the world with a very solid understanding of vegan principles, health, nutrition, animal rights, environmentalism, history of the movement, and then communication principles, which is how to to get this across to people. So whether we're working with people who are dealing with food and weight issues, or just coaching techniques, coaching practice, public speaking. So we've got all that. And then we've got business principles, digital marketing, social media, setting up a business so that people can go out into the world and either start a coaching practice or something else. And a lot of our people have done entrepreneurial things, cowboy boot company, couple of cheese and yogurt companies. We got somebody with an ice cream company in Mexico City, a convenience store in Philadelphia. So it's to inspire people to go out and veganize the world. And of course, we always say, if you also want more on the nutritional and food policy side, take the T. Colin Campbell course too. And I know it's hard, financially in that for people to do two big things all at once, but, life is long, and you can probably figure out how to fit in whatever is going to help you fulfill that Dharma, that job you came to Earth to do.
And when is your next uptake for the Academy?
Yeah, we're involved in one right now, and we're going to do one on the weekends in October.
Okay.
So if you just go to mainstreetvegan.net, you can see what those dates are and get an idea of what the curriculum is like, who our wonderful instructors are. They're just top-notch and amazing. And the course is live. So every session is recorded. So like now, for example, we have 2 people in Africa taking the course. So obviously it's a lot later in Africa than it is in New York City. And so they listen to some of the later in the day courses on the recordings. But the fact that it is in person means that you're getting to know your classmates, you're getting to know the instructors, you can, share. So it's pretty wonderful. And there's also a way on the website to book a little call with me if you have additional questions.
Amazing. I'll put everything in the show notes so people will find it. No problem. And it used to be live, right? But with everything happening in the world, you moved it on Zoom, right?
Yeah, it's still live, but it's no longer in person.
In person, that's what I meant. Yeah.
And it's amazing on Zoom. People used to come literally to my apartment, and it was great. It was very intense. We tried to pack everything into 5.5 days because people were paying for hotels and Airbnbs and whatnot. And now there's this kind of leisureliness of being on Zoom. So in so many ways, it's even better because we can have instructors from different places. We can have time for practice coaching and things like that we didn't have when we were live and, in the flesh. And we still have one thing we're very proud of at Main Street Vegan Academy is that we stay in touch with people. Now, we don't stop people. If you take the course and you're fine and, you don't want to talk to us anymore, that's fine too. But the vast majority of students do stay connected through a private Facebook group. And we have master's classes. We have one-off classes. We have reunions online and in person. And it's just so wonderful because you can get so much help from the other graduates. We have about 560 graduates in 33 countries. So the networking is pretty cool.
That's amazing. Okay, before we end this wonderful chat, I'd like to ask you, if somebody is in a pickle, so they're stuck, they don't know what to do, they really want to create this charmed and kind life. So and especially women that are, struggling with food, what will be like your top 3 advices? I know we talked in broad about what you've done and what you advised, and I did everything you actually ever said. But if somebody's really not sure what's going on, and the first time they come across you, what do you think the top 3 things could be?
The first thing is just do something. I wrote a book called Fit From Within, and it has a chapter called Get Up, Get Dressed, Get Going. Because what happens, and interestingly enough, in yogic terms, we talked about that tamas, that energy of inertia that's just heavy and kind of pulls you down. We often create that for ourselves when we get in these like loops of sadness, depression, lethargy, there's so much to do, I won't do anything, that kind of thing. And believe me, I know all about that place because I go there. And to just do something, to just break that cycle. Like one of the things that I've long said to people who are on an eating binge is just eat out, eat out 3 meals a day for a week. And people are horrified, like, oh my gosh, but isn't that food rich? And isn't that too many calories and blah, blah, blah. It's like, that's not the point. The point is you're breaking the cycle of binge, 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 binge. You go out, they bring you your food. And when it's over, it's over. And so this is the kind of thing we need to do in life. If we're in a cycle that is destructive, and it doesn't matter. Sometimes people get all caught up in why am I like this? Why am I here? I'm doing everything right. Why am I feeling so bad? I don't know, but just change it. It's like the why is something you can talk about over tea, but the how is right now. We're going to change it. So number one suggestion is just do something. Do something. Clean your house. Take a bath. Go to a movie. Just do something, get things kind of shaken up. Okay. Number two, if you're stuck, and I'm going to talk specifically here to people with food issues, because the world does not understand us. And I say us, and some people would say, but look at you, you're skinny and you haven't overeaten in 38 years. Yeah. You know what? If my spiritual fitness faltered to a terrible degree, I mean, it falters a little bit all the time, but if I really lost it, I would not go shoot up drugs. I would not go pick up sailors. I would go back to the food because that's the nature of who I am. So if you are someone who has trouble with food, find people who get it. And I cannot help but recommend Overeaters Anonymous because it saved my life. And I'm not saying that everybody there is perfect, that you're going to love, every single minute of everything that anybody says. But that 12-step program that was invented by Alcoholics Anonymous, I don't even think invented. I think it was revealed to the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous back in the 1930s. Nothing has been shown to end an addictive pattern like those beautiful spiritual steps. So I would highly recommend that you check out Overeaters Anonymous, oa.org. If you went years ago, try it again. Because you're different today, and everybody grows and evolves. And I'd also recommend a book that I wrote called The Love-Powered Diet, and that takes people through the 12 steps. You still need a group, but and then the second half is a vegan way of life. And finally, number 3, what I'll say is find the stuff that's bigger. So if you're a person who tends towards spirituality, then it's that kind of whole big picture, God, Jesus, Muhammad, whatever it is for you. And even if that's not the kind of person you are, find what's bigger in a way that works for your worldview. So for almost everybody, that's going to be some kind of service. That's going to be living in a way that makes a difference. And this is one of the beautiful things about opting to be vegan, because as long as you live, even if you live to be super, super old and maybe you can't get out much and you can't do a lot of activism or do a lot of favors for people, just the fact that you are eating what you're eating, it's saving the lives of animals. It's saving trees. It's protecting this planet. You're creating your legacy just by living this beautiful, compassionate way of life. So my third suggestion is just go for what's bigger. So first, just do something, shake it up. And second, if food is the problem, check out oa.org and the Love-Powered Diet. And then just find your big picture, whatever that is, because once you're in that flow of being part of something bigger, it's like you're carried and then you don't have to climb so hard.
Beautiful. And I would say that if we all get to 70 and look like you, we're doing something right. You look amazing. Your energy, but also I wouldn't say you're over 49.
That's a good age. I'll hold on to that.
Thank you so much, Victoria. You're such a blessing to have on. I'm so happy that you said yes and shared always your beautiful stories. And I will put everything people can contact you. I think following you is such an inspirational way. Also, that, to actually get a charmed life is follow Victoria because she's a great example. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. And I would especially encourage people, if they feel like it, to follow me on Instagram at VictoriaMoran author, because I'm doing a lot of Instagram lives. This year, I'm going through a book that I wrote called Younger by the Day, and coming up with some of those tips in IG lives. Just about every day. I'm going through some life stuff now, so I haven't been as faithful as I would like to be as the year progresses, but would love to see you guys on Instagram and anywhere else that you hang out.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Many blessings. Bye.
You too.
Thank you, Victoria, and thank you guys for listening to this podcast today. The episode was amazing. Victoria is such an inspiration. I just can listen to her for hours and hours and hours. She is wonderful. And I would love to ask you please to like the podcast, share it, and rate it so